Every morning at 5:45 a.m., long before the office lights of Creswell Holdings clicked on and the sales team started bragging about who closed what deal, Denise Jenkins was already there. She pushed a squeaky cart past the frosted glass doors of executive suites, the stale scent of industrial cleaner mingling with the faint, metallic tang of the early morning. They called her Miss Denise. Never Denise Jenkins. Never Denise from accounting. Not even Mrs. Jenkins, as she preferred. Just Miss Denise, the janitor. Her grey uniform had faded over the years, the fabric softened by countless washes, and her sneakers had flattened out from walking the length of that building so many times. She kept a rag tucked in her pocket, a quiet, almost serene look on her face, and a steady rhythm in her step, like she'd been doing this forever. And in a way, she had. 15 years. 15 years of collecting crumpled napkins from conference rooms, picking up forgotten gum wrappers from the break room floor, and wiping fingerprints off the polished elevator buttons that no one else ever seemed to notice, let alone clean. To most of the folks who worked there, she blended into the background like wallpaper. If she was in the room, they talked around her, through her, as if she were utterly invisible. The only exceptions were a few decent ones, mostly interns or temps who hadn't yet learned that pretending not to see her was simply part of the unspoken job culture. But Denise wasn't bitter. Not at first. She kept her head down, kept her mouth shut, and, most importantly, she listened. She listened to the booming laughter from corner offices, the hushed conversations that people thought weren't worth whispering, the crude jokes, the staggering arrogance, and the casual lies. She learned everything she needed to know, not from quarterly reports or company memos, but just from a mop and a good pair of ears. One time, a marketing rep, a young man with an expensive watch and a perpetually bored expression, left a half-eaten sandwich on top of the trash can instead of inside it. Denise picked it up, tossed it without a word. He walked by, didn't even acknowledge her, just looked down at the floor and said, "Make sure the carpet's dry before the 3 o'clock meeting." She smiled and nodded, her expression unreadable. The very next day, he spilled coffee on that same carpet and, with an air of superior indignation, blamed her for not cleaning it well enough. She nodded again. It wasn't the first time. It wouldn't be the last. Down on the 4th floor, one of the senior VPs, Douglas Fairbanks, loud, boisterous, and always reeking of an overpowering cologne, once laughed with his assistant, his voice carrying easily through the quiet hall. "Can you imagine working here all your life and not even having a desk?" He didn't care that she heard him. He didn't know who she was. None of them did. That building was full of people who thought their title gave them value, who thought respect had to be earned with quarterly goals and 10 a.m. meetings that should have just been emails. They didn't know that Denise didn't need their validation. Because Denise owned more of that company than anyone in that building. But she hadn't told a soul. Not yet. As she pushed her cart past the executive offices that morning, pausing to wipe down a gleaming glass wall where someone's fingerprint smudged the company logo, her phone buzzed quietly in her pocket. One message. Just a single sentence. "We're ready when you are." She put the phone back in her pocket, her expression as unreadable as ever. Then she kept walking. But this time, she wasn't just cleaning floors. She was walking towards something. And nobody saw it coming. Before Denise ever held a mop in that building, she sat at a kitchen table in Columbus, Georgia, poring over business plans with her husband, Roland Jenkins. This was back when Creswell Holdings wasn't even a name yet. Just an idea scribbled on the back of a grocery receipt. Roland had drive, that kind of raw ambition you couldn't teach. He'd grown up working his uncle's delivery trucks, running roads through Alabama and South Carolina. He knew logistics inside and out before it was even called a supply chain. Denise, on the other hand, was the brains behind the scenes. She didn't talk much in public, preferring the quiet power of observation, but she had a sharp way of looking at problems, quietly breaking things down and finding what didn't quite fit. In 1998, Roland and a friend named Curtis Banning scraped together enough to start a freight brokerage. They began with just one rented office space, 2 bulky flip phones, and a fax machine that barely worked. Denise was the first to invest. Her father had left her a small inheritance when he passed, a life insurance payout most folks would have used for a down payment on a house. But Denise had a different idea. "Put it in your name," she told Roland one night, her voice low and certain. "I'll stay in the background. Nobody needs to know." He looked at her across the table, his brow furrowed with concern. "You sure?" "I know what I'm doing," she said, her gaze steady, "and I trust you." Over the next 6 years, the company exploded. Curtis, with his easy charm, handled networking. Roland took care of operations, a whirlwind of tireless efficiency. And Denise watched every dollar. She did the books, meticulously filed paperwork, and helped write contracts under a different LLC she'd shrewdly registered, just in case. It was her way of protecting them both, a silent safeguard against unforeseen futures. But Roland, he didn't protect himself enough. In 2004, a wreck on I-85 took him too soon. A late-night delivery run, a tired driver, a flipped trailer, gone in seconds. Curtis gave a weak speech at the funeral, all business, barely a mention of Denise. That was the first sign. The second came weeks later, a cold, calculated move, when Curtis filed documents removing Roland's name and quietly pushed Denise out of all internal communications. He assumed she'd disappear, a grieving widow too lost to fight back. But Denise had receipts. Legal ones. Signed documents from the very beginning that gave her equal ownership of Roland's share. And more than that, she had leverage. She could have sued. She could have walked into that office with lawyers and demanded control right then and there. But instead, she waited. Because Denise knew the difference between raw power and perfect timing. She said nothing. No press. No angry letters. Just silence. Then, in 2007, a job opening showed up on a community board in Monroe for night janitorial staff at Creswell Logistics. She circled it. 2 days later, she walked into the office with a fake resume, a borrowed address, and a fresh pair of work shoes. She got the job on the spot. Curtis never recognized her. Not once. And by that time, he wasn't even the one running the place anymore. A new name was floating around. Thomas Wexler, a young MBA from Florida State who didn't know a thing about how the company was built, but knew how to dress like a CEO. Denise kept her head down, kept showing up, one night at a time, one floor at a time. 15 years. Every trash can she emptied, every bathroom she scrubbed. It wasn't just cleaning. It was surveillance. She listened, watched, waited, and kept every single receipt. But eventually, what you bury comes to the surface. And Denise was almost done digging. By year 10, Denise knew every square inch of Creswell's headquarters in Birmingham, Alabama. She knew which hallway had the loose floorboard that creaked underfoot, betraying even the lightest step. She knew which microwave in the break room sparked ominously when you closed it too hard, a small, daily rebellion of faulty machinery. And she knew which of the directors routinely used company cards for lavish personal dinners, padding their expense reports with impunity. She didn't need to guess anymore. She knew exactly what was happening within the company she had helped build. Creswell had gone from a tight-knit logistics company, founded on grit and mutual respect, to a cold, bloated operation. Upper management, sitting behind their gleaming glass walls, threw around jargon and empty promises while frontline workers were barely hanging on. Denise would watch warehouse drivers come in, their backs aching, clutching overtime slips that never seemed to get approved. She'd hear the HR ladies whisper about cutting corners on health benefits, their voices hushed, tinged with a helplessness that resonated deep within Denise. More than once, she saw mid-level managers escorted out, fired without notice because they'd violated some obscure protocol, usually for speaking a truth the executives didn't want to hear. One of them, a man named Terrence Doyle, made the mistake of speaking up in a staff meeting about salary disparities. He was gone within a week. Denise was invisible in those rooms. No one filtered what they said around her. At first, she just listened, a quiet, absorbent presence. But then, she started writing things down. She kept a little black notebook inside her locker, tucked behind a plastic bag of backup gloves. It was filled with names, dates, direct quotes, who said what, when they said it, and who was in the room. If you flipped through the pages, you'd find entries like, February 14th, we can cut the bonus pool for lower staff. They'll take what we give them. Wexler to CFO. Room 508. June 3rd. warehouse safety violation ignored. Man slipped, no paperwork filed. Brenda saw it. August 19th, heard Wexler say, let the janitor clean it up. That's what she's paid for. I was standing right there. It wasn't bitterness fueling her. It was a cold, sharp clarity. She saw a company drowning in arrogance, its foundation rotting from the inside out. One night, around 11:45 p.m., Denise paused her cart outside the sixth-floor executive suite. The hallway was dark, save for the sliver of light coming from the main conference room. She heard laughter inside. Wexler's voice, booming and self-satisfied, carried easily through the thin door. So, I told him if he doesn't like his pay, he can clock out and try his luck driving DoorDash. I've got 20 more resumes waiting. Laughter followed, brittle and uncaring. Then one of the VPs, Meredith Chandler, added, half these folks should be grateful we even let them in the building. They all laughed again, a chorus of privileged contempt. Denise stood there, unseen, unheard. After a moment, she walked away. Not with anger, but with confirmation. The more she saw, the more she understood. This place wasn't just broken, it was rotten. And they weren't going to change just because someone asked nicely. They needed to be replaced. She started planning, quietly, piece by piece. She met with her attorney in the back room of a diner off US Highway 280, a discreet and direct man named Elliot Miles. She handed him a flash drive. Inside were years of notes, photos, recorded conversations, everything she'd meticulously documented since day one. Elliot didn't say a word for a long time after going through it, his face grim. Then he looked at her, his gaze steady. You know, once you do this, it's going to shake that whole building. Denise nodded. It's already shaking. They just don't know it yet. He smiled. I'll start drafting paperwork. The plan was simple. Let them walk straight into their own trap. Let them keep thinking she was just a cleaning lady. Let them underestimate her one more time. She wanted them confident, comfortable, because the fall always hits harder when you never saw the ledge. But sometimes, even the most patient fire needs just one spark. And that spark was about to happen on a regular Tuesday afternoon. It started with a paper plate. Denise had just finished cleaning the third-floor break room, wiping down the counters until they gleamed, taking out the overflowing trash, and refilling the cheap, powdered creamer they brazenly called premium. She was walking past the long conference hallway when she saw it. A half-eaten slice of birthday cake sitting dead in the center of the hallway floor, a plastic fork sticking out of it, chocolate smeared on the plush carpet. Someone had just left it there, not even on a table, just dropped it with casual disregard. She bent down slowly, not because it was difficult, but because something about that plate felt deliberate, like someone had done it just to see what she'd do. As she picked it up, a voice, smug and self-assured, cut through the quiet. You missed a spot. It was Wexler, standing at the end of the hallway, hands in his pockets, a smirk playing on his lips like a man with nothing in the world to fear. Denise turned her head just slightly, her expression unreadable. Excuse me. He walked toward her slowly, his gaze sweeping over the floor she'd just cleaned. Right there, he said, pointing to a spot next to where she'd been. We're about to have a client presentation in here. Think you can give the floor another pass before they come in? There was no spot. Not even a scuff. Denise stood up, the cake plate in one hand, the mop handle in the other. She didn't say anything. Wexler stared at her, then chuckled, as if she were part of some inside joke he found endlessly amusing. I swear, sometimes I think you people just pretend to clean so you can stay on the clock. Her eyes narrowed, just for a second, a flicker of something cold and sharp. What people is that? She asked, her voice low. He paused, a flicker of surprise crossing his face, then quickly recovered, half laughing. Oh, come on, don't be so sensitive. I'm just saying, if I paid you a little more, maybe you'd find the spots before I did. She blinked once, her face an unmoving mask. Then she nodded. I'll make sure it's spotless, she said. Wexler clapped his hands once, a sharp, dismissive sound. That's what I like to hear. He walked off, proud of himself, thinking he'd put her in her place. He had no idea. That night, Denise didn't go straight home. She went to the Crestwell Records room, an area she had quiet access to after hours, thanks to a spare badge she'd borrowed months ago from a manager who'd once left it on a sink. She moved quickly, methodically. She pulled files, took photos, downloaded emails and budget reports. And most importantly, she printed a bonus report from that same quarter. It showed Wexler had given himself a $55,000 performance bonus for operational excellence. Meanwhile, he'd cut employee meal stipends, reduced driver overtime rates, and frozen raises for custodial and warehouse staff. It was all there, laid bare. The hypocrisy, the greed, the blatant disregard for the very people who kept the company running. The final straw came the next morning. One of the janitors, Cynthia, came into the locker room crying. Her teenage son had been in a car accident, and she'd asked for a day off to visit the hospital. Her request was denied. Denied. Cynthia choked through her tears. Not enough coverage, they said. Denise sat there, listening to the raw, visceral pain, watching Cynthia unable to finish a sentence. No one from the executive office cared. She was just a name on a schedule, a disposable cog in their well-oiled machine. Denise didn't say anything. She simply stood up, pulled her phone from her bag, and stepped outside. She called Elliot. "It's time," she said, her voice a steel blade. "You sure?" Elliot asked, his own voice losing its usual calm. "I'm sure." "All right," he replied, a grim resolve entering his tone. "It's going to be messy." "I've been cleaning up messes my whole life," she said, her gaze fixed on the distant skyline. "Let's go." Over the next 48 hours, Denise set the wheels in motion. She gave her lawyer the final receipts, a mountain of undeniable evidence. She made arrangements for a closed-door shareholder meeting, scheduled an emergency review under her legal rights as majority holder. The funny thing was, none of them noticed. Not even when she came in the next day wearing a new coat, a pressed blouse, and shoes that hadn't touched a mop in months. She walked past the front desk, didn't even glance at her old cart. She took the elevator to the 8th floor, straight to the boardroom. But what she had to say wouldn't just change her life. It would shatter everything they thought they knew about power. The boardroom at Cresswell Holdings had 12 leather chairs, one ridiculously ornate chandelier, and a $14,000 custom table flown in from Seattle. Wexler once bragged about it being real walnut, like that was supposed to mean something to the janitors who cleaned gum from under it. At 10 a.m. sharp, the quarterly review began. Wexler stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, his tie loose, exuding an air of ownership, as if he owned the very oxygen in the room. To his left sat Meredith Chandler, his second in command. Next to her, Curtis Banning, the only man in the room who should have known what was coming, except he didn't. Denise walked in 5 minutes later, silent as a held breath. No mop, no gloves, just a sharp navy blue blazer and a folder in her hand. Wexler frowned, his composure momentarily faltering. "I'm sorry, we're in a meeting. Maintenance is supposed to come through after hours." She didn't blink. "I'm not here for maintenance." The room shifted, a ripple of unease. Meredith squinted at her. "I'm sorry, do you have an appointment?" "I do," Denise said, walking slowly to the far end of the table. "And I believe the shareholders were properly notified." That's when Elliot walked in behind her, briefcase in hand, calm as ever. "Good morning," he said. "My name is Elliot Miles, legal counsel for Mrs. Denise Jenkins, majority shareholder of Cresswell Holdings." Silence. Wexler's mouth opened, but no words came out. Denise laid the folder down on the table and flipped it open. Inside were signed partnership agreements from 1998, updated ownership documents, and a notarized letter transferring full voting rights to her upon Roland Jenkins's death. Curtis shifted in his seat like someone had pulled the rug out from under his feet. "No," he muttered, shaking his head. That can't be right." Denise turned to him, her voice firm. "You remember the contracts, Curtis. You helped write them." He didn't speak, his face a mask of dawning horror. She stepped forward, her voice calm and low, yet piercing. "For 15 years, I watched this place become unrecognizable. Watched you pad your bonuses, ignore safety violations, and punish employees for asking for basic decency. She looked straight at Wexler, her gaze unwavering. "And I watched you turn my husband's company into a playground for your ego." Wexler tried to laugh it off, a desperate, hollow sound. This is a misunderstanding. I don't know what kind of scam this is." "It's not a scam," Elliot interrupted, his voice clipped. "All documents have been verified. And as of this moment, Mrs. Jenkins has called for a vote of no confidence in the current CEO. She has the authority to do so under the original shareholder agreement." Wexler stood up, both hands slamming on the table. "You don't know what you're doing." Denise walked around the table slowly, looking each person in the eye. 15 years, she said, her voice weighted with the memory. "You all looked past me like I wasn't even there. You let people suffer. You let this company rot. I gave you every chance to show some humanity." She paused at Wexler's chair. "And you failed." He turned red, his face contorted in rage. "You think you can just walk in here and take over?" She leaned in, her voice a quiet force. "I am the company." Elliot placed a small stack of letters in front of each board member. "Effective immediately, Mr. Thomas Wexler's contract is terminated. Security has been notified." Wexler's voice cracked, a pathetic sound. "You can't do this." "She already did," Curtis muttered under his breath, watching helplessly. Security entered seconds later. They didn't say a word, just waited. Wexler looked around the room for backup, found none. He grabbed his phone, his pride, and stormed out, followed closely by Meredith, who suddenly remembered she had another, far more pressing, meeting. Once the room cleared, Denise turned back to the remaining board members. "I'm not here to play boss," she said, her voice softening slightly. "I'm here to rebuild what this place used to stand for." One of the younger board members, Jonas Evers, barely 30, raised his hand hesitantly. "What exactly do you want to do first?" Denise smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "Start by listening to the people who've been ignored the longest." She closed the folder. "Change starts today. But just because you take out the garbage doesn't mean the house is clean," and Denise knew the real work was only beginning. The following Monday morning, Denise parked in the executive lot for the first time. She didn't like it, not because of the space, it was bigger, closer, covered from the rain, but something about that lot felt disconnected, like it had been reserved for people who didn't know what it meant to sweat. Still, she parked, walked in, head held high. She greeted the front desk receptionist by name. "Good morning, Tasha." The young woman blinked. "Miss Denise." "It's just Denise now." She stepped into the elevator, no mop, no cleaning cart, just a notepad and a full calendar. By 9:30 a.m., she was in her office. New paint on the walls, same window view Wexler used to brag about, but she didn't spend much time looking out, too much to do inside. First thing she did, called a staff meeting. Not for the board. Not for the executives. For the employees, drivers, admin staff, janitors, customer service representatives, all invited. The room filled up quickly. People looked confused, some suspicious. No one knew what to expect. Denise walked in, stood at the front, no microphone, just her voice. "I want to start by saying thank you," she began. "Most of you never knew who I was, and you didn't need to, because your work spoke louder than any title in this building." She paused. "I'm here to change things, but not by myself. I've spent years listening to your frustrations, your fears, your ideas, quietly. Now, I want to hear them out loud." People started shifting in their chairs. It wasn't what they expected. A driver named Alonzo raised his hand. "Does this mean we get overtime back?" "Yes," Denise said. "And retro pay for the last 2 quarters. You'll see it on Friday's check." A woman from HR, Deborah, stood up. "And the health coverage. It's been getting worse every year." "We're already reviewing new providers," Denise said, her voice firm. "And every employee will get a survey to weigh in. No more backroom decisions about your well-being." There were no applause breaks, no over-the-top reactions, just silence, and then murmurs, people turning to each other like they were slowly realizing she was serious. Someone asked, What about the people Wexler let go without cause?